Okay, so starting this webinar off. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very special evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Anupam Gupta, and as the title of the seminar goes, we are going to talk about the Victory Project, Gurcharan Das in conversation with Saurabh Mukherjea. We're going to understand how you can have a successful and satisfying personal life alongside a meaningful personal life without sacrificing your core values. It looks like the three are very separate things, but we think that all of them can move together, which is a professional life, a personal life, a meaningful personal life, and not sacrificing your core values. Gurcharan Das, sir, who's with us, is an author and former CEO of Procter and Gamble India. He's an author of many books, a few plays also, including a much acclaimed trilogy, India in Unbound, The Difficulty of Being Good, and Karma, The Riddle of Desire. Saurabh, as you all know, is a CIO and founder of Marcellus Investment Managers, which we are organizing this event for. And his recent book, The Victory Project, is already on Amazon's bestsellers, as is his previous book, Coffee Can Investing. I'm very happy to be part of the Victory Project. So let's start things off. We're going to divide our discussion into three parts of around about 10 to 15 minutes each, and leave the remaining half an hour also for your questions. So as a reminder to all the participants, you can ask your questions in the Q&A box. So this is part one. We're going to talk about the great Indian dream. It's ever since India opened up in 1991, the great Indian dream is one of success. To some extent, the dream has come true as millions of people have been lifted out of poverty. India's GDP has tripled in the last 20 years in one of the biggest economic feats for a large democratic country on this planet. Gurcharan Das was prescient. He saw this early on, as early as 1999, in his book India Unbound, from the independence to the global information age. He wrote, "Commerce, they say, encourages the bourgeoisie virtues of thrift, hard work, self-reliance, and self-discipline." I think those are the building blocks of an aspiring middle class, and that's what you saw since 1991. You saw this middle class dream play out, for example, in the tech sector, where India boasts today of more than 30 startup unicorns, where large employers like banking and technology have created millionaires among us. And yet, we know that this is just half the story, with smashed up infrastructure, deteriorating mental health, breaking down marriages. We paid a cost for this success. It's not been an easy transition. Many of us still struggle to even get started on achieving our dreams. So let's start this discussion with Mr. Das. Mr. Das, you've given us two riveting stories in the forward of your book. So let's start with the first, The Mouse Merchant. This is a 11th century story, sir. Tell us the story and that message.
Well, yes, 1,000 years ago was a story which would be so perfect for our startup age, because it's a story of a startup going back to 1,000 years. And you know, before 1991, this story, we can only tell this story after 1991, because in the age before that, the 40 years before that, when we did not have our economic freedom, there was basically contempt for merchants, for business. And so my little mouse merchant would have been a figure of what the socialists would have called exploitation. Anyway, India is the oldest storytelling culture in the world. And what I liked so much about the Victory Project is the fact that you've told stories. India Unbound also tells stories. So does The Difficulty of Being Good. And it's really, this particular story comes from 1,000 years ago, an anthology from Kashmir called Katha Sarit Sagara in Sanskrit. And it's a story of a boy. He's a teenager and he's coming of age. And they're poor. His father's dead. His mother works as a maid, cleaning houses. But she tells him When he has come of age, remember, you are a young man of destiny. I don't want you to have a life like mine. Your father was a merchant, but he died early, and so we became poor. And now you go to that house over there. It belongs to the richest man in town, and go to him for advice. He will help you. The boy is a shy young man. He's just in his late teens, and he stands outside the door. And while he's waiting for the merchant to come out, he sees a dead mouse in the courtyard. And when the merchant comes out, the young man greets him and says, "Can I have the dead mouse?" The merchant laughs. He says, "People come to me for so many things. You are doing me a favor by removing a dead mouse from my courtyard. Don't you want anything else?" The boy said, "No, I'm fine, thank you." So he takes the dead mouse, goes to in his neighbor is a widow. She has a cat. So he sells the mouse as cat food. And she gives him a few paisa, with which he buys some gram, chana, and he makes pudiyas of chana, and he takes water and goes to the town square. He knows that in the afternoon, loggers come, bearing logs of wood on their heads from the forest. And they come down, and to each one he offers water and chana, snack food. And they're so grateful that they each give him a log because they have nothing else to give. And so the boy next day puts all the logs in his house, and then he takes one log, buys more chana, and he does the same thing every day for 3 months. And then the monsoons come. Logging stops during this time. The price of wood, the price of timber shoots up. This boy has a house full of timber by this time. So he starts selling his logs of wood, and he makes a killing. By the end of the season, he's rich enough to buy a shop in the timber market. And in the timber market, when he sets himself up, he has one competitive advantage over his other timber merchants, which is that those loggers know him. They know him, and they appreciate what he did for them. And so they give him more business. And anyway, he flourishes as a timber merchant. But after a few years, he realizes that the margin in trade is still very small. There's more money to be made in building a ship, he realizes. So he gets a master carpenter, like a wadia. That's how the wadias began, as ship builders. They were master carpenters. So he makes him his partner. Collaboration. I mean, this book is going to illustrate the points in this book also. So he makes him his partner. They start building ships. They start selling ships. And after a while, he realizes that the guys who buy the ships from him and run the ships make much more money from passengers and freight going on the ships. So he gets himself a new partner and gets into the business of shipping. Anyway, by the ripe old age of 23, he is become the richest man in town. And so he goes to a jeweler, asks the jeweler to make me a gold mouse. He takes that gold mouse to that rich merchant and thanks him and tells him his story. And the merchant is flabbergasted, amazed that he gives his daughter in marriage to this young man. Now, what this story is illustrating to us really are some of the principles in this victory project. The principle of simplicity, all these Saurabh is going to tell you, collaboration, innovation, and from my perspective, the most important value of determination. I believe determination is more important than even intelligence
Yes,
in
sir.
leadership.
In fact, I'm going to.
So anyway,
Sorry.
so you, so this is a story of those values that you spoke about, Anupam. So over to you.
Oh, you just gave me my next question, sir, because you spoke about determination, and we know that, as the middle class dream also requires a lot of hard work, and you can look upon it even in popular culture, whether it is songs or whether it is, just last year the top song that we all sing was "Apna Time Aayega." So this entire thing of hard work and the great Indian dream is something that's very, very inbuilt in us since 1991, and the story that you said just brings it out. You just gave me another fantastic point: determination, or what you would like to call attitude. This, which gets me to the second story, which, when I remember this, me and Saurabh were sitting in your house, that lovely house of yours. And folks, those who are watching, the books behind Mr. Das are real, okay? If people like me and Saurabh might be hustlers and show you this artwork of wallpaper, believe me, those are real books. So, sir, let's get on to the next story, because when you told us the story, we were just completely captivated. This is more of a modern day saga. It's something which is so humble and so inspiring. Tell us about that.
Well, the second story, the real story. Mouse Merchant was a fiction, uh, but I think the best things I learned in my career, I had a 25-year career in business, and then I moved. I mean, I became a writer after that. But in my business career, I learned more from a temporary security guard who came for the night shift in our office than I learned from Harvard, from going to Harvard Business School. And what this fellow taught me was, what this boy, he was a young man, he came from Akola, and he was metric pass. And he was such a dehati that he could not pronounce the name of our company. Even till the end, he used to say Procter and Gamble, instead of Procter and Gamble. Anyway, this guy, in his very first days, we could tell that, he was different because he had a childlike curiosity. He loved the office. And quickly, somebody asked him, they thought he was a chaiwala or something, a chai lana. And you know what this guy does? He's a security man. He could have said, nahi, nahi, mera kaam nahi hai. He learned how to make chai. He learned how to make coffee. And from the next day, between his rounds, he started serving tea and coffee. Then, even though he didn't know any English, he learned how to run the telex machine. We had telexes in those days. Then he started, the EPBX, the switchboard. You know how we used to put those wires into the switchboard in those days. And he learned how to run the telephone system. And he also learned to run the projector. Now, of course, we are a marketing company. So we see a lot of advertising, and brand managers, it's very important for them. So they had the unbelievable luxury that after 6 o'clock, they could watch their commercials from the agency. Anyway, this guy, in a period of a few months, just charged up the office, the positivity, the energy. He affected everybody else around him. And if you needed anything, you said, ask Kamble. And frankly, I saw people staying later and later in the evening. And I asked one of the young managers, I said, why do you stay late? He says, because the evening office works better than the morning office. Anyway, after 9 months, our telephone operator, during the daytime, she was having a baby. So she went on maternity leave and we needed another telephone operator. So Kaude, that was his name. It's a made up name because I don't want to give real names. Anyway, Kaude goes to the personnel manager and he says, look, I'm tired of working at night. थक गया हूं मैं ये रात को काम करते. Give me a chance to work in the day shift. I'll be your temporary telephone operator. And the personnel manager practically fell off his chair and he says, Kamble, you can't even speak English. And we are a multinational company. You can't even pronounce the name of our company. Our company. How can you run the switchboard? And we get calls from all over the world. So poor Kamble went away with a long face. And I heard about the story. So I went to the personnel guy. I said, I'd seen what Kaude had done during, I had seen what he had done. And so he, ये दे दो ना उसको. नहीं ठीक है अभी नहीं करना. So the long and short of it is that Kaude, I got on to the job. Personnel manager agreed. He said, "ठीक है, if the guy doesn't work out in 3 days, we'll get someone else." And so what happens is that within 2 days, I get a phone call from our company lawyers, Crawford Bailey. The partner says, "Do you have a new EPPX system?" I said, "Why?" He says, "Your phone is always answered on the second ring. Before, I used to be on hold. Took the 5th ring, 6th ring." I said, "No, our EPBX system is Kaude." And sure enough, this guy started doing the same thing in the daytime office. He energized the place. He started chai, in between answering phone calls, he was doing many things. And he had basically a spirit of service. And he had a childlike curiosity. He loved the job. And so I asked Kaude, I said, "Why do you answer the phone after the second ring?" And he said, "There may be a customer at the other end." That took my breath away. I think our finance director couldn't have answered that question as well. Here was nobody, no MBA, nothing, metric pass. The guy knew who paid his salary. It was the customer and not his boss. And so I think Kaude is an example of a person who used to, he loved his work. He used to forget himself in his work. And with that attitude of curiosity, he kept learning every day. And he used to forget himself. Now, this is, I think, a very important quality. We talked about other qualities, determination, etc. But the quality that the charioteer, Krishna, the advice he gives to the general on the Kurukshetra field is of karma yoga. Do your duty. Be intent on the action, not on the fruit of the action, not on the reward. And so Kamble is the kind of guy who didn't care who got the credit. He just liked to do his work. And I just feel we'd all like to fill our companies with Kaudes. Sure. And so the lesson for me, Anupam, is that we make the mistake, all of us, and business schools don't teach us this, but actually in recruiting, hire for attitude, and train people if necessary in skills. We do the opposite. We hire people for skills, we hire people for intelligence, we hire people, he went to Wharton, he must be good. So, whereas what Kaude showed me is that great companies, in fact, Goldman Sachs hires for attitude. One of the few companies I know. That's why you've got to go through 25 interviews with partners. Yeah. Each is $10,000 per hour time. Yeah. So that's something I feel that can create competitive advantage for us, because attitude is free. You know, you don't have to invest in R&D to have a superior product. You don't have to lower your price and hit your bottom line.
Absolutely, sir.
You hire for attitude and you build a company of giants.
Yeah. Saurabh,
last thing I want to say here
sure.
is that Kaude went on to become a director of the company.
That is phenomenal. That is what a great note. Saurabh, we wish we had bosses like Gurcharan Das ji back in our day. Oh God knows what. Okay, so Saurabh, I want to wrap this first part with your take, right? So you're someone who's also chasing the great Indian dream, right? I mean, there was a while where if I have got it right, you spent the early part of your childhood here in India, in Delhi, which kind of explains why your Hindi is so wonderful despite being a Bengali. Sorry for the despite being a Bengali. Your Hindi is phenomenally good. And then you went to London and then you came back. In the past 10 years, you also achieved a lot, whether it was taking the previous, the firm where you worked all the way to number one on the polls, or whether it is here at Marcellus, the work that you're doing. You are also chasing the great Indian dream. Let's wrap this first part of our show with your take on all this.
So I think Anupam, it's a privilege to be here, not with one of the writers that I think we've learned from and we've grown up with. So my parents migrated from India, as luck would have it, the month before India liberalized the economy. So before, I think, 8th or 9th June 1991, Manmohan Singh came up with the new economic policy, and my parents migrated the month prior. So by the time Gurcharan Das published the India Unbound, right? By the time he published India Unbound in 1999, I was a freshly minted graduate in London. And in a way, I found out about the revolution of the 90s, the unleashing of energies via this great book, right? And the book, the first sort of 250 pages of the book just blew my mind as to how much the country had evolved in the preceding 50 years, leading up to the turn of the century. So then when you and I started working on the Victory Project 2 years ago, right, from the outset, right, I kept thinking that Gurcharan Das wrote in 1999 about India Unbound. Here we are 20 years on, we are the unbinding, right? The Victory Project, Marcellus, our generation, the startups that are blossoming in our country. This is the unbinding, the unleashing of energy. And this is not just entrepreneurial energy. This is not just, the economy. It's a revolution in culture. It's a sexual revolution. There's a revolution in attitudes to women, to caste, to religion, right? So when we started writing the book from the get-go 2 years ago, I was thinking that wouldn't it be nice if we could persuade Gurcharan Das to write the foreword of the book. So I remember a year or so ago when you and I went to his house, I didn't let on then because I couldn't, my heart was pounding like a jackhammer. Right? Here we are in front of a Titanic author whose books are sold around the world. The BBC makes programs around his book. And there you are, you and me, sort of weekend authors, purporting to go to Gurcharan Das's house and request him to write the foreword. And then when he agreed, to be honest, at that point, the Victory Project was made for me, right? At that point, I said, doesn't matter how many copies this book sells. In a way, the man who presciently saw how India would change, he's decided to write the foreword for the book. And finally, when Mr. Das sent us the final version of the foreword with these two lovely stories, right? The Mouse Merchant and Cowardice story at PNG, he brought together, right, as all great authors do, he brought together in sort of 1,500 words, the other 6 chapters of the book, right? He brought together the essence of the Victory Project, right? Because when we talk about Victory Project, when we talk about peak potential, 6 steps to peak potential, we're not so much talking about making $1 billion or listing your company in the stock market. We're talking about doing justice to your talents in the circumstances that the world lets you live in. And both his stories exemplify that. And what we have tried, you and I have tried merely, is to give a sort of logical framework through which hardworking, talented people in our country and beyond our country can rise in the world. But that sort of the synchrony of India Unbound 1999 and Victory Project 2000, the synchrony of it was what I think appeals to us. And in these 2 lovely stories, Mr. Das has sort of helped us bring alive the whole essence of the book.
Sure. So, folks, that's the first part. Now, this is a very nice rags to riches story, so to say. If you look at it that way, hard work gets you success and all the kind of stuff. It's paid out really well in some cases. I want to now get to what I would call, probably the hairy part, okay, which is essentially success and the difficulty of being good. Because as India increasingly becomes a free market economy, and believe me, for all practical purposes, India is there. It is a free market economy. Companies, large and small, are incentivized to chase profits. Okay? Our lives, therefore, are part of this corporate rat race. And no wonder then that our career decisions are easily slotted into doctor, engineer, CA. I know that I'm a chartered accountant, and I know that how this decision was made for me back in the day, without any relation to what we actually love doing. Okay, so but there are two things that get drilled really, into our heads early in life by our parents or by society or whatever. And I think those things are probably justified from where the people who are drilling it come. So first is that you must ruthlessly follow the crowd and forget your dreams. Okay, because if I were, for example, to go and tell my parents that I want to become a podcaster, I know what response I would get. And the second is this concept of blind hero worship. That the individual is essentially the center of success. It could be your boss, could be your CEO, could be the politician, could be anybody, could be Virat Kohli, Amitabh Bachchan, whoever it is. That one person is essentially the way to succeed. So from these 2 points, being successful in our lives comes at the cost of killing your dreams, okay, and getting ahead of the guy next to you, okay, so that you aspire to become the hero worthy of worship. That's not always true. In his book, The Difficulty of Being Good, Mr. Das writes about the moral dilemmas of tough decisions, and he uses so many stories of the Mahabharata to show that you can be good and successful at the same time. So, over to you. Tell us about these moral dilemmas.
Well, I saw, in 1999, when I published India Unbound, I predicted that India was going to rise. And I must say, obliged by rising. And so I saw the years after Bajpai, the telecom revolution, Bajpai, the 1997 budget that Sindhamram unleashed, India's reforms.
Okay, I think, sir, we're having some difficulty in hearing you and getting your visual. So
I think, Gurcharan, if you just turn the video off at your end, I think we'll be able to hear you. Just turn the video off and we'll be fine. Just put the camera off and we'll.
Folks, sorry about that. Meanwhile, if I can just tell all of you, if you have any questions, just post them in the Q&A box that's right there, and we will get your answers. Mr. Das, please.
So you can hear me now?
Slightly.
Am I audible?
Not really, sir.
Slightly. Not really.
Okay.
Maybe what we can do is...
You're better now, sir. You're better. Please keep talking.
Okay. So I saw that India obliged, as I said, by rising. Prosperity began to spread in the country. And the problem I saw was that prosperity was spreading, but happiness was not. And the main problem was corruption. And that's corruption that eventually led to the Anna Hazare movement and Arvind Kejriwal, etc. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, sir, we can. Please go on.
Okay. Shall I turn on the video?
Please try.
Shall we try?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
It is, sir. Let's give this a try.
Okay. So, essentially, I was concerned about the fact that here was a country rising, but 1 out of 4 and 1 out of 3 politicians in the state governments, in the state legislatures and in the parliament had a criminal record. I was concerned that 1 out of 4 teachers in a government school was absent, and 1 out of 2 who was present was not teaching. A child in the 5th class could not read a 2nd class text. So, and teachers, 90% of the teachers were not able to pass the teacher's eligibility test. So there was a huge problem. And so I went to the Mahabharata, because the Mahabharata is obsessed with dharma. And one of the things I learned from reading the Mahabharata and reading reading what Vidura had to, Vidur Niti is part of the Mahabharata. What Vidura was teaching was first that the Raj Dharma is essentially the king's duty to help the people. But the problem often occurs that it's hard to know what is that duty and how do you measure it. Now, in India's case, of course, the problem, we think of the problem as an individual failure, but it's also a failure of incentives of the institution. It's an institutional failure. And so I realized that actually the answer from a national point of view was to reform the institutions of governance, which is to say that the 4 institutions of governance are the police. Today, nobody wants to go to a police station. You're afraid you might get beaten up. Now, that's not what the police is supposed to do. It's supposed to help the people. But it's basically to help the chief minister. That's the job of the police. The second, justice. It takes 15 years to get justice in the courts. And there are lakhs of cases of people under trials who are in jail. They still haven't come up for trial. Third, bureaucracy. A man who works 2 hours a day and doesn't do anything gets promoted on the same day as a man who works 14 hours a day and does tremendous work. Now, what kind of motivation does that give you? So there is serious need for administrative reform. And as I told you, that in Parliament, 1 out of 3 legislators has a criminal record. So all these things bothered me, and I realized that the story of India was a story of a country that was rising despite the state. And that's why we coined the slogan, India grows at night when the government sleeps. The question was, though, Gurgaon, look at Gurgaon versus Faridabad. That's an example I gave in my book, India Grows at Night. Faridabad had all the advantages, but it was Gurgaon that became the modern city colossus.
Sure.
And Gurgaon rose because of, despite the state.
Sure.
So India's story is a story of a bottom-up success, of success of the people, of its entrepreneurs who have risen almost despite the state. And therefore, one of the things that I was hoping that Mr. Modi would do when he came to power was do these governance reforms. And in one respect, the ease of doing business has improved. Our ranking has improved. But the main reason why it's improving is because everything is going online. You don't have to go now to a tax office to give your assessment. You do it online, faceless assessment. And similarly, you get wherever that has areas that have been digitized. You couldn't get an application form for a college application without paying some money to the chaprasi in the school. You remember that college. So all that with online has, That's to me an example of institutional change. And that is really for me, the story is really that this idea of a country rising despite the state is I mean, we can celebrate it,
Yeah.
but ultimately we need to have the reform done. Now, just a quick point about public morality, which I talked about, Raj Dharma, and private morality. We judge people in this public for their motivations, and whereas we should judge them for their consequences. So you take the story of Lalit Modi. Lalit Modi created the IPL. My God, I mean, it's one of the greatest achievements that we have got, achievement of entrepreneurship, achievement. It's given a life to cricketers, to young Indians, to fans, to the quality of the game, to the point where India has become the center of gravity of cricket in the world. But yet this guy was corrupt. Now, how do you judge him? That's the question. And I'll tell you, when the Vidura talks about this, Vidura and Draupadi have a discussion about this issue. And I must tell you that when I was trying to figure out this problem of dharma here, I read a story in the newspaper about a child who was drowning in Goa, and a boy jumped in and saved this child on the beach in Goa. And the reporter went to the boy and she asked him, "You're a hero. How did you do it?" And he said, "Why did you do it?" And he very sheepishly confessed that they were a college party from Hindu college in Delhi, and he was trying to impress a girl in the party. And then she said, "You mean you may not have jumped if nobody was looking?" And so he says, "Maybe not." Of course, he was being honest. But the reality is, she said, "But then you're not a hero." But Vidura would say, the child was saved. The dharmic deed was done because the child was saved. Why are you worried if he was trying to impress his girlfriend? That's not important.
Yeah.
I just want to mention this to you because we make this mistake all the time, and we don't look at the consequences of an action, and we look at the motivations.
That's a great way to to put this action in the motivation. Sort of, as someone who's been on both sides of the desk, buy side, sell side, whatever, you've seen how cutthroat competition is in India. I mean, we just spoke about how the economy is growing and people have got opportunities, but competition in India is serious. I mean, when I was on the sell side, when even you were on the, I mean, you would know more than me that for someone who's breaking into an elite club of brokers who are very large requires some amount of effort, requires some amount of motivation, and that's maybe you might not be able to get people who are subscribed to the same dream. So how was your experience in setting up your team in on both the times, first on the sell side, then on the buy side, and in general, how has that shaped your views about achieving this harmony of being good and achieving success?
So Anupam, I think the challenge and the charm of living in India, they're two sides of the same coin, and I think Gurcharan Das has brought them out beautifully. So whether it's broking, whether it's fund management, whether it's accountancy, law, whatever the line of work one is in India, the reason there is plenty of opportunity to build businesses in India is the market is big, it's growing. There is a shortage of, there's a paucity of high quality vendors. So across industries, you can go forth, venture forth, set up your business and hopefully prosper one day. So that's the charm of living in India, regardless of which line of work you are in. The challenge of living in India are the failed institutions Gurcharan Das was talking about. Because it does not matter what profession you are in, you will encounter the failed institutions, right? And after 12 years in this country, I joined those millions of small businessmen who sort of dread our encounters with these institutions, right? So it's two sides of the same coin. In a way, because the institutions are challenging to deal with, That is part of the reason why the opportunities are in abundance. And now what this dilemma creates, right? Challenge and charm, two sides of the same coin, is it creates epic moral dilemmas, right? The dharma dilemma, right? And that's why the spirituality chapter 4 of Victory Project was actually the hardest chapter to write. I think you and I probably struggled with that chapter, the spirituality chapter, more than any, because at a practical level, we all know what we have to go through to push forth in life. But at the same time, we sort of hate to concede that that's what we have to do to push forth in life. And we're looking for sort of moral binaries. We want to see the world in black and white. But as Mr. Das explained, you can't see people like Lalit Modi in black and white. And I think we could discuss on this Zoom call 100 prominent Indians. I don't think any of them could be seen in black or white, right? Because this country lends itself, the challenge and the charm, the two sides of the same thing, lends itself to shades of gray. And learning to make peace and learning to find your way through those shades of gray, learning about morality, learning about spirituality, being able to go to sleep at night after dealing with all of this stuff through the day, is I think one of the big tasks for any successful professional, and hence the spirituality chapter of the Victory Project. But there's also another aspect of India which these challenges create, which is collaboration. Because it's a tough country to move ahead in, what India is teaching us is the most successful business communities are not ones where people go gangbusters at each other, cutthroat competition. The most successful business communities, the most successful companies are communities or companies with an intensely collaborative credo, right? And the collaboration chapter in the Victory Project is the one I savor the most for many years to come, because success, especially in the context of our country, is about subsuming the individual's identity, and focusing on the collective. Whether you are TCS, whether you are Amul, whether you are the Marwadi community, right? And the Penguin, the story of Indian business, the book on Marwadis from Jagat Seth to Birla by Thomas Timberg, I think is a gorgeous book. It's, I think, no more than probably 100 pages. But in 100 pages, he helps people like me, non-Marwadis like me, understand why this community of 8 million Indians has disproportionately driven Indian GDP and their wealth by an intensely collaborative ethos. The outside perception is Marwadis are cutthroat competitors, but as you get to know the community better, you realize it's an intensely collaborative community. And that, in a way, is the lesson of India, that if you want to deal with this ambiguous society, with this ambiguous legal construct, then collaboration is essential to succeed. And I wish I had learned this sooner in my stay in India rather than 10 years into my stay.
Okay, guys, Saurabh, Mr. Das, it's already 5:45, and I have a ton. I have a ton of questions. Okay, so I'm going to cut this really short. I'm going to request both of you all to just wrap this up by just answering the question by some 350 people have logged on. Just give us the answer to the question, and then we'll hit the Q&A. Guys, just keep on posting your questions. Oh, just 1 minute, guys. Okay, hold on. Please don't ask Saurabh for what stocks he likes, what sectors he likes, and please don't ask Mr. Das on how to run an FMCG company. Okay, all that is out of the table. Please go and buy the books that they have written. Other than that, keep your questions limited to our conversation. Mr. Das, the question: how we've gone through a lot in the last 6 months, not just India but the entire world. What lies ahead? How can we actually have a successful and satisfying professional life alongside a meaningful personal life without sacrificing our core values? Let's get your take on that, get Saurabh's take on that, and wrap this up.
Yeah, well, I think that's really the central question. And it's happiness, ultimately, human happiness. I always believed in a one-sentence definition of happiness. Happiness is to love the person you live with, and happiness is to love the work you do. Now, if you want to know about the person you live with part, read The Riddle of Desire, my third book. But as regards loving the work you do, it was Kaude who really made me realize how you could love the work you do. And what I've realized is that for most of us, we get a job because that's what we're expected to do, make a living. And that's partly what happened with me. My mother was, with a middle class insecurities, a father who was a government servant. And I had nothing, I had no inheritance. The reason I went to Harvard because I got a scholarship. So the point I'm trying to make is, but my father said, my mother was keen that I make a living. My father said there's something called making a life. And so all my sort of years, I have tried to figure out what he meant by making a life. And it's very important that, because for many of us, we get into the middle age, we become successful, and then we say, well, is this what life was all about? So if we think ahead about our lives, we can love our work, or at least we can find an outlet which will provide us a wholeness to our life. And so what I'm trying to say here is that, we are not born like Mozart. Mozart at the age of 4 was a musical genius and he knew it. We sort of stumble through life. And for us, it's not finding ourselves. That's the mistake. We say, oh, you're calling. No, it is you create yourself. And so what, in my case, when I went to Harvard, my father was an engineer. I said, I'll become an engineer. And so, but very quickly I discovered history, science, philosophy, Sanskrit, and I did all these subjects and finally got a degree in philosophy. Then I had a scholarship to go to Oxford to do PhD in philosophy. But suddenly I said to myself, oh my God, I don't want to spend the rest of my life at that stratosphere of abstract thought. So I started selling Vicks Vapor Rub. So it was quite by accident that I got into business, no business training. But I loved the rough and tumble of the business life, meeting stockists, having chai with wholesalers and everything like that. And I created a self. But I also became a weekend writer because I had that intellectual sort of side to me. And I had a hobby with writing. And if you take your hobby seriously, you do well in it. And so I wrote plays in my 20s. I wrote a novel in my 30s. And by the time I was in my 40s, I also realized that I was beginning to repeat myself, and I was getting tired of the business world. And so I then I quit the business world and became a writer. The point here is that I think all of us need to be aware. Either you can be like Cowday, who loves the work every day. He makes every activity in business a play, a game, and he plays to have fun. Or you can have another side of you, which you can cultivate over the weekends, etc., which was in my case, and you can have a satisfying. In my case, I wore 2 hats and I did it. But I do think that we should not be afraid of the idea that we can create ourselves. And that's really a very long answer to your short question, Anupam.
Saurabh, all yours.
I mean, look, if you ask me how does one find happiness, I think the first thing is to aspire to have a library like Gurcharan Das's. I think if I had a library like that. Second thing is aspire to, and as a writer, write a book every other year. In my case, one on finance, one on non-finance. But more generally, beyond people like you and me who've been able to leave sort of jobs in the mainstream world and become entrepreneurs. More generally, I think given how competitive India is, and this is part of being a free market economy, we can't sort of say we'll be free market economy and not have competition. Given how competitive this country is, if you are not doing what you enjoy doing, it's going to be very difficult to succeed in India. So everybody out there, I think there are lots of questions in the question sheet as well. I'm doing this, should I be doing this? As close as possible, align your passion with your profession, right? It might not be a perfect fit, but as close as possible, align your passion with your profession, make that your specialization. And the second thing is find a group of people to work with, people you like, people you admire, people you're able to work with day in, day out in intensely challenging circumstances. That's I think the sum total of my ability to summarize the Victory Project.
Okay, guys, 5:50. Okay, Saurabh, Mr. Das, now we got to run through this as quick as we can. Guys, I've tried my level best to bring in as many questions as possible out here. I'm a little bit wonky on finding the questions, and then so I'm trying to make a list of questions and trying to bunch them up into similar sounding topics. So I'll get one out of the way right now. This is for Mr. Das. Mr. Das, there's a gentleman here who has quoted from this wonderful book called In Service of the Republic by Dr. Vijay Kelkar and Ajay Shah. Okay, and he's saying, how do we get the administration to solve this for us, or rather to take it to the next level? What would be your answer to that?
Well, if I were in Mr. Narendra Modi's shoes, I would wake up with that question every day. And I would relentlessly work to do those 4 reforms. Remember, I told you there were big milestones in our history, 1947, 1991. There are a couple others which we don't have time to go into, but the big milestone will come when India begins to grow during the day. And so we are waiting for that milestone. And in fact, I did mention this to Mr. Modi when I met him too soon after his election. And he kind of hinted that he would do this in his second term. And I hope he will. He has done the agriculture reform, the very important agriculture, as well as labor reforms, very, very important reform. But I would hope that this area, and what needs to be done, it's all there. Everybody knows what's to be done. In the case of in both, like criminals in Parliament, you just fast track there. The reason they get into Parliament is so they can slow down their cases. You just fast track those cases. Anybody who is in Parliament, special courts, within 6 months, you are guilty or no, nobody will join Parliament if they know about these courts. So that's what I mean. I think that's it's the most important thing to be done. Really, okay. Unfinished project.
Sure. Saurabh, I have a whole bunch of questions here, but I'm going to just bring them down to 2 things, okay? Because a lot of these guys are asking, how do you find the best people? I'm working in a job and I'm stuck. I've got a bad boss. I've got this. I've got that. Essentially, what are your views on collaboration? For people who are there in that job and are not able to find that, are not able to get a breakthrough. What would be your views on that? As someone who's who gets, I don't know how many job applications per week, per month. Maybe you could talk about it from what qualities you're looking out for with the backdrop of the Victory Project.
So I think there's 2 ways to think about it, right? As an employer and as a colleague, right? So as an employer, you capitalize on the fact that we have a wealth of talent out there. And when you set up your shop and when you put up your advertisements, you clearly say, this is what I need. I need A, B, and C. So if you need analysts with strong accountancy skills, ability to work long hours and say high levels of integrity, you advertise for that and you test for it. You test for forensic accounting when they come for the interview. You test for previous record of achievement. You call up 20 people the person has worked with and test for and reference check his ethics. I think that's a simpler one. You as an employer, I think it's one of the great privileges to hunt in one of the deepest talent pools in the world. It's a slightly different subject as a colleague, right? How do you create a collegiate work environment where politics is minimized and people are focused on delivery? I think that's where we've been extremely privileged by working on Unusual Billionaires, then Coffee Can Investing, and then writing Victory Project. We've had the benefit of talking to some of the greatest minds in Indian business as to how they have decentralized control, decentralized authority, given transparency on targets that are expected of managers, and sort of kept the head office slim, so to speak, right? If you sort of become an omnipotent, all-seeing, all-conquering promoter slash CEO, India will sock it to you right in the chin. But if you're willing to decentralize, you're willing to abdicate authority, responsibility, power, and set clear, transparent targets. We've seen from companies like Asian Paints, from Pidilite, from HDFC Bank, that in this country you can build vast companies at great speed.
Okay, Mr. Das, a whole bunch of questions around the Mahabharata. I'm going to throw all of them at you. Some are asking lessons from Mahabharata on investing. Some about lessons of Mahabharata on detachment. Some are saying that, listen, if the key message is that outcome is important, consequence is important, but not how you get it, then what future is there? I'm not sure that's the right interpretation. But let's take all these three at a time. Lessons from Mahabharata on investment, on detachment, and on the whole karmanne vatekar is to ma phaleshu, that whole thing. I think I got it right there. Almost.
That's right. Well, the Mahabharata is 1 lakh verses. And you want me in the next 3 minutes to summarize the heart of it. And I really feel very difficult. I mean, it's a difficult job to do. All I can say to you is that one of the important lessons for us in India really is that we were always, India is a country where the society is strong and the state is weak. Historically, China is the other way around. History of China was a history of empires. Ours is a history of kingdoms. And the king in India was relatively weak. And so I personally think that's a strength of our country. And so the critical, of course, you need an effective state. You need a state that gets things done. But what we don't want is what just now Saurabh was talking about, the all-seeing leader who will take us to nirvana. That's not the ethos of the country. And if you ask me modestly, one of the things, if I were in Mr. Modi's shoes, I told you I would do those 4 reforms of governance, but I would also make India more comfortable with the market. The idea is that most people think the market is, I know I'm not answering the question, but this is an important point, that most people have they think that reform and markets are all about the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. And they confuse the notion between being pro-market and pro-business. Pro-market means to favor competition, and pro-business is giving out sort of crony capitalism and giving out favors. Actually, it's license Raj, if you think about it. So all I wanted to just say at the end is really that we forget that markets actually are moral, in the sense that if I buy mangoes in Khan Market near my house in Delhi, and this woman who sells me the mangoes, she had been selling me very weak, poor mangoes at a high price. I told my neighbors, they said, oh, we also experienced it. We all switched to her competitor. Now the market punished her for misclaiming about her product. Similarly, if we treat our employees well, then we'll get the best employees to join us from the IIMs, etc. And we build a reputation. Again, the market itself, competitive market, rewards us. And so the market actually, similarly, a supplier, the purchase manager always tries to squeeze a supplier. But ultimately, if you squeeze them too hard, you get hurt because you get a component that's substandard. So all I'm trying to say here is I would sell the market as that we should not have, I mean, look at the difficulty we are having right now. Narendra Modi has done a wonderful, the agricultural reform, but the farmers are up in arms because nobody sold them. Okay. Margaret Thatcher used to say, I spend 80% of my time selling. And 20% doing the reform. So that is a very important lesson that I would give to Mr. Modi. I know I haven't answered the question.
No. So Mr. Das, you're with us only for 10 minutes. So Saurabh, just be on hold out there. Okay. I'm going to just there's so many questions from Mr. Das out there that I'm going to just get them out of the way. And then, hopefully I will come back to you. Guys, another reminder, do not ask Saurabh about what to buy, what to sell, and how we see the market and how we see everything else in the last 10 years. Please don't do that. And for Mr. Das, okay, guys, just go on an Amazon or a Flipkart. Honestly, he's written so many books. Go to his website, use this site. Okay, I'll tell you, it's a secret. The site is called Google. It's simple, google.com. Type in Gurcharan Das. He's got a fantastic website. All his books are out there. My recommendation, India Unbound. And he's got 4 books on the 4 points. The 4th is actually, I'm giving you a sneak preview. Okay, Artha, Dhamma, Kama, Moksha. He's written 3 of them. All your answers are in those books. But since you've asked them, Mr. Das, so okay, I'm going to again, I'm going to combine a few out here, and I'm going to take up from the last thing that you said about Mr. Modi, administrative reforms and stuff like that. So 2 things, Mr. Das. One is, there is a view that the last 6 months have taken, the biggest casualty of the last 10 months has been democracy. Probably because of, you've had the countries where you had an open, transparent government with institutions haven't done well in this pandemic, whereas you have something like a China which has done well. So the first question is to you on that. How do you see democracy or or specifically the Indian civilization going forward? The first question. And the second, kind of related to that, somebody has this interesting point. He's saying corruption in China is different than corruption in India. Your views on that. So these 2 questions.
Well, the first question really is that I think India could only succeed as a democracy. As I was telling you, society in India, society has been strong, the state has been weak. And what you need, of course, in China, the state is strong and society is weak. You need both. You need a strong state and a strong society to make the state accountable. And so I would say that a country like India, I mean, we should celebrate the fact. I mean, our neighbors, we don't have to worry about generals, in our country. Most countries worry, third world countries, they worry about the generals in power. And I would say that China's success is a success that is enviable. I mean, hats off to them. No nation in history in the course of 30 years became such a powerhouse country. But what we don't know is the price in terms of people's emotional lives. Their human liberty is very important to the human heart. So I don't think any Indian, even though they are so far ahead of us and they're materially much better, I don't think Indians would vote for being a Chinese type of government. Now, as to the second question, was
corruption in China being different as compared to corruption in...
That is that same dharma problem that I told you about, that here's Lalit Modi, and do you prosecute him and destroy him? Or do you celebrate some of his successes and find a way to manage? In other words, the problem is this, that in India, you can be corrupt and still not get your work done. And at least in China, you pay your money, they'll deliver you the goods.
Sure.
And here, I think the more things go online, the less we'll have this problem. I do think that they're just to reduce discretion, administrative discretion, and make a rule, society, a rule of law. You know, China, we say that, I say that India has law and China has order. What we need, like the television series, you need law and order.
Ah, one of my favorite series. Yeah, Law and Order Special Victims Unit.
Right. So we need law and order.
Sure.
And so we need to have the governance of China. Let's not forget that. The governance of China, not their political system. The fact that there's predictability. You go outside your house and there's a predictability about that.
Okay.
That's what I would
Sure.
say.
So I have I think I have about 4-5 minutes from you. So I'll just sneak in these questions to you. So there's someone who, two questions here. Both are for someone who's in his late, probably 40s or somewhere. There's someone who's near retirement. What would be your advice to these guys? Let's say that if there's someone in mid-career. In fact, I think our case study in our book alludes to someone like this. Disillusionment in the mid, whether you call it a midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it, is it possible to change tracks that late in life? That's the first question. And second thing is, for a retired person, what should he look forward for to connect with the younger generation?
Okay. Well, the first point I think I tried to cover in the session. In my case, if you find, and this is a common problem, you can become a CEO and you can still say, you can build a great company. And at 51, you can say, oh my God, is this what life was all about? You don't want to say that. So I think you raised a very, very important question. And as I was saying, creating a life, life changes every day, every year, and every decade. And so it is being able to create yourself continuously. And in my case, I found out that I had a hobby, and I made my hobby my profession, my second career. And so if you do something, if you know you like something, but you still need to have a job because you have a young children or whatever, you have to send them to school and all those things. The thing would be to devote some time to yourself, and devote to your sort of passion. You can start in a small way, whatever it is, it can be, but take it seriously. I took my writing very seriously from the first day, and I kept learning and getting better and better at it. And so I would say that is one way. The other way, of course, is to have the Cowday type attitude into your work, which is you just love every day and love the work you do from day number one. Like a child, with curiosity, you play the game and you play it to win. So both kinds of things are possible. And for the person about retirement, I would say it's a wonderful idea that connect with young people, becoming a mentor, becoming a teacher. That's the time. To stay young yourself. The best formula is to be around young people.
Sure.
So very, very good thing to do. If you can do it, you're lucky.
I hope that you can hang around with us for a while. If you do, that's great. But Saurabh,
I can stick around for another 5-10 minutes. Sure.
Fantastic, sir. So, guys, yes, this webinar is going to be recorded. You will be able to see an entire session, this entire session play out. But I'm going to call time on the questions. We're not taking any more questions from now on. So then, sir, I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions to Saurabh. Please jump in. Just please jump in with your views out there. Let's just make this into a very informal thing. So, Saurabh, here's the thing, and we get asked this question so many times. What's the starting point? How do you find what you love? Because even in our book, that's where the entire process starts from. And I think that, I don't know whether it's a society thing in India or whatever it is, but we've where do you think one starts the entire process of finding what you love? Does that take a lot of time? Is it iterative? What are some key pointers from you? And sir, please jump in with your thoughts also.
So just to sort of back the truck up a bit, as the Americans would say, one is, so why do we recommend in the book that make your passion your profession? Because it's an intensely competitive free market environment. If you are not doing what you love, the employer will see it. You will not excel. You will not excel. You will not rise in the world. You'll be unhappy ultimately. Now to answer your question, Anupam, how does someone figure out what they love? As the great American psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talks about flow. You know you love something when you're doing it, you lose track of time. Right, so in our case, it might be whilst writing, we lose track of time. Somebody else might be playing music. Somebody else it's cricket. Somebody else it's selling Vicks Vaporub in Ratlam. Right, so to each his own. But when you find that what you're doing you enjoy so much that time melts away, that's when you love. That's when you know you found what you love. Next step is specialize in that. Find a guru and rise in the world by using that profession as your ladder to sort of personal fulfillment and expression.
So that's anything from you? Finding what you love, pursuing what you love. How do you?
Well, I think Saurabh said something very, very profound, and that is that time gets distorted. You suddenly say, if you love something, you forget what you're doing, and you suddenly say, "Oh my God, it's already 8 o'clock," and you suddenly felt maybe it's 6 o'clock. You've lost 2 hours suddenly. Now those 2 hours were the hours when you were what was called, you had forgotten yourself. This art of self-forgetting is a very Buddhist idea also. It's also in the Hindu philosophy. But the notion that the idea of karma yoga or nishkam karma is precisely the one where you forget yourself. So if you're looking, so I think Saurabh has given a very good idea here. The Zen masters is a very critical thing that they teach you is the same idea that, otherwise if you're not absorbed in something, then you're thinking, oh my God, why did he get a bigger office than me? Why did she get promoted before I did? And all those other things which basically are not very productive and create internal competition inside an organization, when you should be worried about your external competitor rather than your internal competitor.
The other question that I have is on balance, Saurabh. So, and this is again something that we know very well, that balancing financial goals with happiness and balancing this competitive capitalist world and spirituality. So let's take it one by one. First is, balancing your financial goals. If you remember when we met Professor Bakshi, he told us about this, that very early on you have to be frugal, so that you get financial independence soon, and financial independence is a key to success or whatever. That might come at the cost of happiness. Okay, so let's deal with this thing first, both of you. Saurabh.
So again, I think I'll go back to this library, right? So I think for each person, figuring out what makes them tick in life is important, right? If doing marketing in, say, the tier 3 towns is what gets your juices flowing, that's what you derive happiness for in life. You're obviously not going to then spend the rest of your life figuring out what is the latest phone to buy, what is the latest car to buy, and how much can I spend on my next launch. However, if you have got no real purpose in your life, right, you haven't figured out a purpose in life, you're not really enjoying your job, that's when you're most likely to go and blow your money away on material things in the crazy hope that will somehow satisfy you. So ironically, the reason we put spirituality in the foundational layer of the Victory Project wasn't because you and I have had some great epiphany about spirituality. We realized that if you're living a life in this insanely competitive country, if you're living here and you haven't figured out a goal which makes you which completely consumes you, takes up every hour of the day, it's going to be very difficult for you to be happy here. So I completely agree. If you end up spending a lot of money on the good things in life in terms of material comforts, you will obviously have a financial challenge. And if you're doing this in your 20s, then you better be earning a lot of money in an investment bank somewhere in BKC. But for the rest of us who live middle class lives, living within our means is actually not very difficult in our 20s or our 30s, because in a way spending money itself becomes a secondary goal to pursuing something we like. Now that being said, to get there, to get to that state where you're able to be Professor Bakshi's type frugal, or Gurcharan Das style Zen Buddhist, it does take a little bit of work, and it's not you're not gonna wake up one morning and suddenly develop frugality. That effort, that ethic is worth cultivating because it leads to outstanding outcome.
Let me throw the second part to. Sorry, Mr. Das, please go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I just had a quick. I think just to follow up, I wanted to say that this is partly our duty to our children, teachers to their students, we to our children, our grandchildren. What we owe them is to help them find their passions. And it's not an easy thing. What I'm trying to say is, it's not also something, oh my God, one day I found myself. It doesn't work like that. We kind of stumble onto it. We're not like Mozart.
Right. Yeah.
We
so I'm going to pick up from. Sorry.
And so the process of stumbling onto it is something that we as parents should encourage in our children. Don't say you got to study engineering. Don't say you got to become a doctor. That's a sure formula to end up at the age of 40 or 50 saying, is this what life was all about?
I think this is my cue for saying that at the age of 13, I wanted to study English at St. Stephen's and become a writer, but my dad wanted me to go to IIT, right? So because India is unbound now, I am a writer, and I didn't go to IIT.
Right.
I can't anticipate what my son is going to tell me in a few years. Last 10 minutes, guys. So Saurabh, you said, and yeah, Mr. Das is he's an epitome of Zen, right? I kind of look at him as Shifu from Kung Fu Panda. Like he's really reached that Zen level out there with so many books around. So I have to throw this to you, sir. So and because you're so well traveled and you've seen, you've written about this, remaining happy in a highly capitalist world, growing professionally, and achieving spirituality. Is there something in the text about this, or in general, even your view about this? Because, yeah, all yours.
I think we've been skirting around this, but we've also been touching this thought that, frankly, if you are in a state where you are happy doing what you're doing, loving, I'm talking about Kaude now. To me, he comes back all the time in my mind, because here was a guy, ultimately, I think the real spiritual person was he, because he was living in the moment. Every day, every moment was a joyful one for him. It was learning things. He was playing a game. And if you can think of your life and your work as a game, Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras talks about one of the siddhis, perfections, is laghima. Laghima means lightness, not like a feather, but like a bird, that you can fly like a bird. So with that lightness, and I think if we can cultivate that sense of absorption that Saurabh also spoke about, where you have that flow, that self-forgetting. If you are able to forget yourself, you have made it, man. That's really you have attained a certain level of stress. And that absorption that comes from it, whether you're an Einstein or a Cowday, I think it's all related. The idea, and that's why it's so important as to our next generation. When you are with a child, how do you uh, get that child to sort of find it and stumble onto it, frankly? And you can keep changing. There's nothing wrong. And you can find it at 50 or 60. You know, you can change it, find it at any point. It's basically to get out of yourself.
Okay.
It's the self is the problem, which is the old Upanishads. Upanishads said that this problem is the self. So if you can get out of yourself, you are on your way.
Guys, sorry for this disco lights here. I'm having some problem with the electricity. Sort of your views. This entire thing of capitalism, high growth, cutthroat competition, and spirituality.
So in a way, the external circumstances melt away. Those who are able to focus internally and say, this is where I stand in the world. This is what I'll do. Here is my specialty. This is what I like. Here is the guru who will show me the first sort of 10 years of my path through the promised land. And one of the great privileges of living in India today is this is a country in intense ferment, right? The ferment arises partly from the institutional failures Gurcharan Das spoke about. The ferment partly arises that the sort of the great ideas which have defined the world in the last 100 years are at play in India. Free market versus socialism, a secular state versus a communal state, a national identity versus regional identity, right? So we are living in a country which is the one of the most exciting playgrounds of this century. In that country, opportunities will be in abundance, but with the opportunity comes challenge. If you're able to focus your mind, your energies, find a guide, find a group of people you can work with, I think you'll get as close to flow as you can in a real world setting. So Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi might have written the book in the American context 30 years ago, but I think finding professional fulfillment and personal fulfillment in India is as possible today as it's ever been, and it arises from the fact that this is a country in ferment. Were it an ossified, stable society, Anupam, it would be much harder, because in an ossified, stable society, you're forced to bend yourself to the mores of that society. If you haven't got there, in this flux, we can find happiness.
Okay, last three. So this is a simple one, and I think you can bring in a lot of perspective on this from the ancient text, and sort of we can bring a lot of our book from deliberative practice into this question. Simple: luck versus skill. Where does it, what's your view on this entire thing of luck versus skill, Mr. Das?
Well, I think you need both. Yeah, I mean, the reality, after living as many more years than Saurabh and you have, I would say that the Greeks were right, that there is a huge amount of luck in life. But the way I think of karma, which is my spin on karma, is that if you're a youngster and you do something wrong and somebody tells you, no, don't do that, and then you start doing the right thing, and that right thing then becomes, you keep doing it, it becomes a habit. Once it becomes a habit, then slowly it becomes your character. And then when you're older, as you grow, you're reaping the rewards of that character that you have.
Sure.
And so I would say, that's a kind of way to make your own luck, if you will. It's the law of karma, which is working to make your own luck in a particular way. Think of it as that. And that's where I think, I mean, this is a point that Draupadi in the Mahabharata keeps reminding us several times about this idea, that she says, well, there are two farmers, and one farmer works hard and the other one doesn't. He's a drunkard. And she says, well, if it doesn't rain, then both are going to go to hell. And the bad guy will say, well, you know, I told you so. There's no point working. But if it does rain, the good guy will repeat the rite of abort. So I think in our sort of going through life and all, there is a role of luck. But luck can be slowly, you know, tweaked to work in our favor.
Sure. Saurabh, we've written, I don't know, we've covered this in depth, right? I mean, the entire point of deliberative practice and creating your own luck. Your views?
So I think we saw that in just at work, right? Remember, in our book, we have written several places that memory and creativity are intensely linked to each other, right? And as we read deeper for the creativity chapter, Anupam, we realized, right, based on the work of Howard Gruber, Doris Wallace, and Adam Grant, that the reason memory and creativity are so fundamentally linked is effectively the expert mind is able to recall the right bit of information at the right juncture to fire the creativity engine. And we've seen Gurcharan Das do it, right, for the last 90 minutes or so. He must have read so much Hindu mythology, the Mahabharata, Ramayana, but exactly at the right juncture, he's able to recall the right anecdote. And that, you can see, is why, what's driving his creativity. It's making his books enjoyable reads. Now, clearly, it doesn't come easily, right? He's been writing. Gurcharanji, I'm right in saying you've been writing for the last 30 years full time.
Yes, I've been writing now full time for since 25 years full time.
So 25 years of he's done the Malcolm Gladwellian 10,000 hours comfortably, right? And at that level of expertise, he's able to recall the right anecdote for the right place in the conversation at a sort of drop of a penny. That ability, right? If you can cultivate that in whatever your profession is, this ability to recall the right information, right? Memory and creativity are fundamentally linked. Your memory fires at a high level. Your creativity is bound to fire at a high level. That in turn drives excellence. You minimize the role of luck. I'm not going to deny, Mr. Das, that luck plays a great role, but we are part of the MS Dhoni generation, and we are taught by the great Mr. Dhoni that focus on the variables you can control and leave the ones that you can't control to the gods.
Right. Well, that's what he also said. Draupadi's point was that, look, I don't control if it will rain or not, but I do control the fact that if I seed my field, that I'll reap the reward when it rains.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. So second last question, and it kind of comes in from the luck versus skill thing, and it's a very important question. I hope that not many of our viewers have gone through this, but these are incredibly tough times. Saurabh and Mr. Das, how do you deal with failure? I mean, there's no other way for me to ask this question. I wish that I could sugarcoat it, but there you have it. It's just plain and simple. How do you deal with failure? Mr. Das, sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, no, I was going to push the peanut towards Saurabh on this one first. Come back.
Saurabh, all yours. Yeah, come on, go for it.
So look, I mean, whilst we all have to put our brave face on it, we've been through very difficult times. I think everybody on this Zoom call, I'm sure, has been through their share of difficulties. My sum total of wisdom at this age is, you're only a failure if you are worried about what others will think of you. If you're able to live a life which is a life built around family, friends, and in a way your perception of yourself, then my reading of the last sort of 10, 20 years of my career is, it becomes easier to soak the punches. Right? We will all get punched hard in the face every now and then, but it becomes easier to soak the punches the less concerned we become about the opinions of others. So there's a French philosopher called René Girard, and I've sort of learned a lot from his philosophy. He says we are all his philosophy is something called mimesis, right? He says the way we decide what to do in life is we basically imitate others. You and I are writing books, Anupam, because subliminally we're influenced by Gurcharan Das as a writer. We also want to write great books and be lauded as he is, and therefore this is also a form of mimesis. Now, finding yourself and finding your identity is fundamentally about realizing that if you're able to do things which make you happy without you're necessarily seeking the approbation of others, is I think is a central part of dealing with failure. It takes time. I'm not saying I'm there, but it's easier now to take failure than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think to follow exactly, I think you've said something right. The inner direction, that if you are directed and driven by your passion, it's much easier because you have something to fall back upon if there's a moment of adversity. I told you, that I was a weekend writer for 25 years, and then I became a full-time writer. Now, during that weekend writer, when things got difficult in the Monday to Friday part of my life, I always had the Saturday and Sunday life where I could go to, and it became something that I looked forward to, and I could lose myself in it. Similarly, if there was a problem with my characters during the weekend life, I can always go back to the weekday life. My point is that it is right that the source of adversity very much, the more serious adversity is not the one that comes from outside, but it's your own problem, your ego, the calm, krodh, lobh, moh, all that sort of stuff. And so I think if you can just get absorbed in what you do and not care about what logon ki kahenge, in Punjabi we say, what will the others think? If you're not worried about that, if you really are got confidence that you doing what you like doing, you'll be a cowday and you'll manage adversity.
Wonderful. Let's give our viewers something that they love to do: reading. My best question, that this is just the right point to wrap this up. Saurabh, you want to go first? Favorite books?
So for writing the Victory Project, we learned a lot from David Epstein's Range. He talks about this T-shaped paradigm where you specialize in one area, but you build a whole variety of other skills. So you look like the letter T. We learned a lot from Mason Curry's book, Daily Lives of Great Artists. And third book that we've cited in the Victory Project is Verghese Kurien's biography. I Too Had a Dream, about how he built Amul from basically nothing at independence to a company 3 times the size of Nestle India today. So those would be my favorites. I think of all of them, I had to say Range by David Epstein, very influential book, and how all of us can build a variety of skill sets through our careers and find not just success, but also the happiness we've discussed for the last 90 minutes.
So both of us have to ask you your favorite books. Forget what the viewers want to know, but we want to know your favorite books.
My list ready to jot it down.
Well, to be very honest, I'd have to put the Mahabharata up there, of course, but that's not. There are versions of the Mahabharata that are.
I was just going to ask you that.
Manageable.
Do you have a personal favorite among the versions and the?
Yeah, so I would take the condensed versions, the R.K. Narayan, the humor writer. R.K. Narayan did a very nice translation of it's a condensation of the Mahabharata. And there are one or two others of that name, of I would say in the same genre. But you know, you can't go wrong with the great books. I mean, Shakespeare. If you have the patience to sit for a week just to read one play, you know, it's worth it. Or I would say I learned a lot when I was writing The Riddle of Desire on karma. I learned a lot from rereading Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, or Flaubert's Madame Bovary, or Proust. Proust is a very long book, but the insights about love that you get there are incomparable. I would say, I mean, these are not popular books, unfortunately.
They're classics, sir. They'll always be useful.
Yeah, I mean, if you Google 100 great books, there's something called the Great Books Program, which is just put Google Great Books Program, and there are 100 there, and just take a few, and just if you take one a month out of those, you'll be wiser, certainly every month than you were before.
Naturally, hope to have, if we can have even 1/4 of the library that you have, I think we would have traversed a long distance. Okay, nobody asked me for my favorite books, but let me put them out anyway. Anything that these two gentlemen have written are my favorite. Saurabh, Gurus of Chaos, outstanding interviews with a whole range of fund managers. Unusual Billionaires, absolute joy for me to be part of that book. You don't know how great Indian companies have succeeded. That's a coffee can investing. And Mr. Das has so many books, you know. I mean, you could go for India Unbound. Like I said, the 4 pillars.
I think if you had to cite one, I think difficulty of being good. I think for everybody on this call, right, we're all living through difficult times. The difficulty of being good, absolute sort of joy of a book to read, and incredibly sort of like a balm in these troubled times.
Absolutely. Artha, Dharma, Kama, Moksha. All the best, sir, for Moksha. And sir, you have a TV series on Netflix coming out. Tell us about that. I was really excited about that. What's that about?
Well, I don't know. You know, it's always, this is a novel I wrote, A Fine Family, and Shyam Benegal had bought the rights for it, and for years it languished because he used to get funding. There's a screenplay he wrote also. He had written by somebody, and so listen, I should touch wood, because the thing about being a writer and cinema or TV or, you know, and this whole electronic media is these are not very compatible media. Frankly, books are a writer's medium, and the visual medium is a director's medium. And so if you're lucky, you get a good, I mean, sometimes there's a great movie that will be as good as the original book. But, you know, it's a novel I wrote in my 30s called A Fine Family.
Lovely, lovely. So folks, that is a wrap. Yeah. We wish you all the best, whether it's Moksha, whether it's this. Folks, that is a wrap on this really wonderful session. Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, Mr. Das.
Thank you.
Guys, the book is called The Victory Project, okay? And of course, Mr. Das has so many books, okay? You can just, you like anything, my suggestion to you is go on to Amazon or Flipkart or wherever, give us a rating and give us a review of how you like this book. And we hope that you like this show. Yes, the recording will be there some way or the other. I'm sure that Saurabh will figure this out. Marcellus has been very kind to hold this for us. And thank you for the guys who gave us the Zoom platform. The recording will be out anyway. If you get the book, you have our mail addresses. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer them for you. Folks, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us in the evening. Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, Mr. Das.
Thanks, Anupam. Thank you, Mr. Das. Thanks, Gaurav. Thank you for your help, Gaurav.
Thanks, Gaurav.